Now, here's Steve the Bookman Eisenstein.
Good morning, buenos dias, shalom, mahalo, bienvenue, and welcome to Books on the Bookshelf. I'm your host, Steve the Bookman Eisenstein, and you are listening to us live on the WDBF radio networks. Take out something to write with, take out something to write on, preferences given to those using a quill and ink, and copy down this number. 888-575-4394. That's 888-575-4394. Based on the new members in Vintage Rare and Antique Books this week, 87 of you. It's a little lower than it's been for a while, but we're still happy with that. Your questions can be answered right now on this program during the next 2 hours. That's 888-575-4394. And it's always the same questions. We inherited a few to a room full of books. We run a thrift shop. We get into the storage auction business. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, if you call me off air and ask me for my professional advice, you might get hit with somewhere between $150 and $250 an hour bill, or I might give it to you for free. But this is a chance. You have a chance to get answers to your book value, your book mystery questions. Do I have a first edition, and all those other things, all at the touch of a dial. 888-575-4394. And rare book swag can be won in our trivia contest. My guest today is Erik Lehmkuhl. Erik is, it's just an amazing story. So let me stick to my notes. Check out Erik's webpage as you listen to the show. Erik's webpage is, I'm going to say it, then spell it, professorenchodus.com. And I got to ask you, Erik, if you're listening right now, what does Enchodus mean? I have a feeling there's something to it. So how do you spell it? PROFESSORENCHODUS.com. One more time. PROFESSORENCHODUS.com. Erik has been a frequent guest on Porn Stars when they were doing Porn Stars across America. He'll tell you more about that. But I will tell you, when you go to his site, his webpage, really a fantastic slogan that outlines what he does. Artifacts from the Stone Age to the Space Age. And it's a beautiful webpage. How did we meet? The story on how I find guests is always interesting, funny, um, intuitive, logical, and all those other things. But this one was 1000% intuitive. I wish I could be so intuitive in the lottery. Erik listed a rare book from the 1500s. It was a math book, and it was for sale in Vintage Rare and Antique Books with an asking price of $25,000. The description that he put on this book begged a lot of questions, from good ones to bad ones. Was it a scam? Was it real? You know, as part of the administrative team, when we see posts like that in Vintage Rare and Antique Books, on occasion we'll discuss the posts, their merits, the bells that ring, the bells that don't ring. And this one rang a lot of bells in a lot of different directions. Most of them weren't favorable, and logically so. The A $25,000 book should have a $25,000 Shakespearean, description to it. But I had a very, very strong intuitive vibe that the book was real and that there was much more to the owner of this book than his, you know, could have been worded better post. So I contacted Erik. Turned out to be correct. There's a very deep story there, and he is into some amazing stuff. Um, he agreed that the post could have been better, but at the time, and I guess we all go through this, sometimes we're just so damn tired and overwhelmed. We want to get the mission done, and so we do it. Making post mistakes when too tired, yeah, it happens a lot. But anyway, Erik will join us at 10:26, and it will be a very, very interesting discussion from Stone Age to Space Age. I hope we have enough time. Um, More with Erik later in the program. Special thanks to PBA Auctions, selling 7 out of the 9 lots. We sent them on August 14th. We've got more stuff en route to them. And thanks a lot, guys. Chris Dunlap is the person you want to contact when you talk to PBA about books. And that was Chris Dunlap. And Whitaker, I think is his last name, is the specialist in miniature books. Um, One of the more interesting questions that came up this week on Facebook was, how do you get published in the book business? Writing about the book business. I'm not talking about a novel. I'm not talking about a book publication, magazines, newspapers, periodicals, things like that. I can't address book publishing personally because so far I have had articles in magazines and newspapers published, but like I said, I've never had a novel or a full-length nonfiction something book in my mind. But like everybody else, at a certain point in time, you realize publish or perish. And my track record when I was into that phase was pretty unique and extensive. That time period took about 1983 through probably 2000 or so. What did I accomplish during that time period? And more so, how did I have an 85% acceptance record in getting published? And I kept very accurate track of that. I think I still have my notebook of notes in some box somewhere with all the original articles and rough drafts. Um, the culmination of it boils down to this. I wrote two Q&A columns for 2 years for Bookcase Magazine and for Southern Book Trade Journal. I don't see it happen much with Southern Book Trade Journal because it was a newspaper, and obviously, it's subject to wear and tear. But Bookcase Magazine was a fine, shiny, high stock magazine. And occasionally somebody will put up an article and say, "Hey, Steve, I found your article in Bookcase Magazine." So that's cute. I have authored probably not, I'm not counting the question and answer columns. I think it's safe to say over 50 in newspapers like the Allentown Morning Call, the Dallas Tribune, something in Aspen, wherever there were. My formula was this, part of it. Wherever there was a book show, especially in the 80s, book fairs were very, very well attended and popular generally. So I'm sitting here in Miami and saying, well, there's a book fair in Washington. So I figured, how can I get an article published in the Washington Post? And it was a 2,500 word article with a very interesting story. Um, I'll tell you a little about that further. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So I've written articles from everything from the American Farm Journal, literally, to the Washington Post, the Antique Trader, different newspapers, and so on. And as I said, the time period was in the 80s and 90s, and I had a high acceptance record. So It took a while to develop the approach, but it went like this, regardless of newspaper and magazine, but using this formula. I'll mention the Washington Post article. How did I get published in the Washington Post? And why did I approach them? The why was very easy. In the Antiquarian Bookman's Weekly, it was one of the early, I want to say the first show under new membership, under new ownership, or the first show in Washington, whatever it was in that year. There was an advertisement in the AB that a Washington book fair was coming, Washington, D.C. So I called up the Washington Post, and this trick still works today. And later in the story, I'll tell you how I know it works today. I called up the editor's office of the Washington Post, and I always believed that the executive secretary in an office like that was quite the powerful person and generally proved true. So what I would say is there's a book fair going on in Washington. You're covering it as I see, and I would like to write a special features article on how your readership can identify and sell the collectible books that are found in their home libraries. And another reason I love using The Great Gatsby is because it's an example for almost everything in the book world, is because it's a novel. And back then in the 80s, what was it? 12,000, 8,000, whatever it was. Nobody, would have said, more people know the values of coins, stamps, and objects of art that they don't own than the books that they do. So when you tell someone who knows The Great Gatsby but isn't a collector that the book is worth 10 grand, you got their attention. Later on, I added Harry Potter years later, but that's another story. So I called them up. I knew there was a book fair. I said to the executive secretary, look, I know that, you have a pile of stuff to show the editor and this and that. I think this article really deserves some special attention. And if you do too, can I get close to the top of the pile, if not the top of the pile? And the bottom line is I did. And it was a 2,500 word story that was published. Same formula for every other place. Antique Trader, Antiques on Long Island, whatever it was, the Florida magazine, and so on. So, I pitched them to write an article and they accepted it. So what was even funnier, and when I say a lot of times Rod Serling has scripted my life, getting paid for this story was a Rod Serling experience. I wrote the article. I was living in one place. By the time I published it, I had changed locations at the time. This was 1983. I was then the entertainment director at the Sonesta Beach Hotel. As a matter of fact, I think I might have even been in New York when I penned this article on a visit. Um, and I was working as the entertainment director at Sonesta Beach Hotel. And I actually did a seminar in the hotel on book collecting. And one of the department managers was married to a newspaper guy. They were at a dinner convention one night in Miami, and of course, fate, seated at their table was the Washington Post casting crew. Somehow, my name came up, and hysterical laughter must have followed because we had done a book event at the Sonesta, and I'm trying to remember, it was Barbara. I think her name was Barbara, but I'm not 100% sure. So she told me about that the next day at work, and they asked me for my address, and I eventually got the check. So getting published today, it's tough like any other time. Maybe it's more challenging today with all that's going on. But I will tell you, we all know Andrea Boltres in Australia. If you're listening to the show, she's been on. She's a frequent contributor of very good information in vintage, rare, and antique books. So Andrea and I were doing a messenger talk one day, and a little while ago, and she said, I got to get my name out there. I got to get my name out there. And I said, I understand that. So I said, here's a suggestion. There's got to be, I didn't know the name of it, but there's got to be a magazine in Australia that's considered the leading magazine in antiques. And of course, antiques in Australia, AIA, very good. Okay. She called them up and she's now writing a series, not an article, but a series of articles to them, for them, should I say. So, if you are, looking to write an article on how to identify and sell collectible books, talk about your experiences in it. And let me tell you this, I enjoy writing, but, and you don't always get paid for it. You get paid in advertising and this and that. That's fine. But it's publicity that you cannot afford to buy, even if you had a big budget. I know if I think about how much it would have cost to advertise the way those articles brought publicity, couldn't afford it, bottom line. So everybody's been asking me personal questions. I always say I'm a public face, but a private person. Something happened that was so funny this week that I have to share it, and it's also in the form of an update. All right, all you know, I'm supposed to go for two MRIs. Now they're on the 28th. One is a prostate MRI, and the other is a pelvic MRI. Um, we think the pelvic is because of the hernia mesh. We're not sure about the prostate. Well, I get a call. It was supposed to be this Tuesday, past Tuesday. On Monday, I get a phone call. Mr. Eisenstein, I'm so and so, the office manager at Stand Up MRI in Miami, and I have to ask you some questions. We checked your medical records. Okay. We noticed you had a gunshot wound. Is there any shrapnel or bullet fragments in them? No. Next question. Mr. Eisenstein, during this last 72 hours, have you engaged in marital relationships? Edie and I started to crack up. Okay, the answer was yes. And because of that, and this is, a warning to all, if you have an MRI for the prostate coming up, yeah, you can't fool around 72 hours before that. So I had to postpone it. I mean, that one's got to be a short chapter. And if I ever write a biography or something like that.
I can't
So
believe you told that story.
I know I'm proud of it. I think it's funny. It is funny.
I do too.
I'm not shy. Shy has never been a problem, and maybe learning to keep my mouth shut sometimes is, but uh, anyway, now you know, and you have permission to laugh and repeat it. I'm looking at the time. We got one more minute. So we're going to be joined very shortly by Erik Lehmkuhl, and he is just a fascinating guy. I mean, if you get to watch this on YouTube, you'll see a very interesting painting. This show is replayed on YouTube right after the broadcast is over, but it's also repeated on radio this afternoon from 4 to 6, on Sunday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 3 to 5 p.m. and Monday from 1 to 3 a.m. So we're all over the place. We would love to help you. We got a call-in number, 888-575-4394. If you call the show and I answer your questions, maybe we'll even give you a prize, but you're already getting a prize because we charge a lot for appraisals. Anyway, that's kind of it. And we'll be back with Erik after these commercials.
Shelves. Library shelves. Now, here's Steve the Bookman Eisenstein.
Welcome back, my fellow rare bookians. Got questions? Take out something to write with. Take out something to write on and copy down our call-in number, because between my guest and I today, we're at least four encyclopedias of knowledge. 888-575-4394. That's 888-575-4394. While we're waiting for the miracle of modern technology and to be joined by Erik, I got to tell you a story I read today, and I realized that there was more to the story than I had ever realized as a kid. Okay. Who remembers comic books? And inside the front of the comic book was one of two things: Garcelon or Littleton Stamp Company, or do you have the 1804 silver dollar? Well, I learned a few things about this, and I have a feeling that Erik can probably add more to it than that. Well, let me give you a little outline. We all remember reading it as kids, and if you don't, you probably heard of it anyway. It's probably the most talked about coin amongst serious collectors. Amateurs would know the 55 double die, the 14D penny, all that other stuff. But the 1804 silver dollar. Initially, it was minted for diplomatic distribution. The king of Siam, the sultan of somebody, and somebody else. Even before the Civil War, several books were published about the 1804 silver dollar. Up until a little while ago, there were 15 known copies. 15. And this is without a doubt my favorite kind of story. It begins with hidden since the 1940s. And as we've discussed many times on this show, I think that hidden since whenever, it could be as early as 1830, 1828 to 32, there is a copy of Audubon's Birds of America. But hidden since 1940, number 16, the 16th known copy of the 1804 silver dollar, is on the market at Stacks and Bowers. They estimated to $3 to $5 million. And I'm sure there's more to the story than that, but I told it in just enough time because I see Erik is with us. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Erik. And I'm going to ask you to pronounce your last name, Lehmkuhl.
Lehmkuhl. Very, very good attempt,
Lehmkuhl.
I'll say.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Erik Lehmkuhl, welcome to Bucks on the Bookshelf. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I told the story of how we met intuitively in the monologue,
Yes, yes.
So I'm going to let you take it over from here. And what I always do when I have a guest on is a standard starting question. What got you started collecting anything and build it from there? What was the influencers?
Well, I was, and it's not the first time I've been asked that, but believe it or not. But
I know.
I always tell people the same thing, and it's always this: I was the little boy who loved rocks and dinosaurs, and anybody who's had a little boy knows the phase that I'm talking about. That they go through, and they love the earth and things that come out of the earth, and they love rocks, they love dinosaurs, they love that, and it never really went away for me. There were other things that came and went in my life. I studied other things and I went and pursued other passions. But at the end of the day, I always kind of went back to that as that childhood memory of I just loved doing it. And it just was something that was always there for me. And I kind of, as an adult, later realized, you know what? I really, really liked that. And so I just started pursuing the mineralogical world, the natural world, natural specimens. It wasn't that far of a jump to make it into these artifacts and things of ancient history. And it just kept building and growing until I got into antiquities and rare artifacts, rare books. This is how I finally was able to meet your acquaintance. And that's how it just snowballed from there. And so that's how I just followed it.
I was an entertainment director. I was a swimming pool manager, camp director, riflery instructor, entertainment director, if you broke it all down, and always had the rare book business as a hobby business until. Did you have a real life occupation, so to speak, a job in real life, so to
Yeah,
speak?
I actually was trained from a very young age as an actor and a singer,
Oh,
and
wow.
yep, and I was a vocalist for a number of years, and I did some acting, and I also worked at a summer camp, and I was a lifeguard in my younger years. I did all that stuff. I taught archery at one
Oh,
point.
wow. Yeah, yeah.
Yep, that was a fun little excursion for a while. And I also worked in real estate,
Ah,
property management side of things, and some rental properties, that sort of aspect of the world. And I always did that kind of stuff just because everybody's got to have a job, you know. And I've just been lucky enough to be able to compound this kind of hobby job into something that really does support me.
I hear you. I'll tell you, I just mailed, I had two copies of this book that influenced me in seventh grade to today. And it was Mass Snorkel and Flipper by Lloyd Bridges. And you were the first person that has ever said it the way he said it, if I didn't say it first. He said in this book, the introduction to the book, during World War II, he was a UDT man and trained. He loved scuba diving. In the 1950s, instead of being an actor waiter, he was an
Mm-hmm.
actor commercial salvage diver.
Okay.
And he was also in Studio One with Elia Kazan, you know, his two favorite hobbies, acting and diving.
Sure.
Somewhere in the mid 50s, some producer walks into his office, drops a script on his desk for a TV series called Sea Hunt, and he said, here it is. I'm getting paid to act and dive, my two favorite hobbies. I
Mm-hmm.
hope that you too, reading this book in seventh grade, can capitalize on your hobbies for your living. Well, here I am at 75, still quoting it. So it's stuck. And to hear you say it like that it's really a warm, cuddly feeling.
Oh yeah.
So you've never been at a desk, you know, or any of that stuff. You've always capitalized on your hobbies.
Yes.
Well, I loved what I did in my other jobs, but you had it a little better. I mean, you know, no,
Yeah.
you know, and there's
Yep.
nothing wrong with getting paid to play with people in a hotel, but you know,
Sure.
um, so outline it. What was some of the first things that you started to sell, and how did those move into today?
Well, I'll tell you that the other dealers or other people that I know that do this and they buy and sell things for a living, we kind of all have the same story. And the story is this: we all start as collectors, right? And eventually our collections grow to such a degree that you look at it and you go, you know, maybe I don't need 10 of the exact same thing. Surely I could sell two of them. I'll keep eight, you know, I'll just sell two. And you know, and that's how it starts. And then you keep growing, you keep collecting. And the people who do know this, when they come and they see me at some of the shows and the venues that I sell out of, they look at all the stuff, they're super impressed, and they say, my gosh, like what does your house look like? I'm like, yeah, I you should see the stuff that I don't sell. You should see the stuff that I decide to keep. Is very impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's how it starts. Is it really starts as a collector? And then the other thing, and I'm sure I'll say it again during the show, is that it really is all about the network of people that you know. I got to say that, you know, 90, if not more, 90% or more of the experiences that I've had is because of, I know a friend of a friend, or people would say, hey, like, I get a good feeling about you, very similar to how you and I met, this intuition, this intuitive nature about it, you know. But that's how you really get success. You can't just cloister yourself in some corner and be selfish about it, or try to be the biggest guy at the show or anything. If you're just a real down to earth person and you're relating to people and talking to people, that's how I've been able to grow so much, is just from knowing everybody.
It's a combination of who your client list is and who you know world and where that can
Yes.
lead you. Sure. You know, rarer than the rare book sometimes, or the rare anything, is the buyer for it. So the
Oh,
wider your network, you
oh
know,
yeah.
the better it is. What was some of your earlier sales? I mean, was it mineralogy, gemology, antiquities? You mentioned something about hunting for artifacts, but I think explain the picture of you in the tunnel.
Sure. Oh, the me in the tunnel.
Yeah.
So the picture of me in the tunnel, that was in, we were in Morocco, and that was actually an abandoned lead mine that we were in. Because oftentimes, like the best thing that I'll tell people, and this is a really good example, is there's some rare minerals. There's azurite and malachite. Most everybody's heard of malachite, the very pretty green stone, and there's azurite. Well, the thing that people don't necessarily realize, at least, you know, oftentimes, is that those two elements occur where there's copper. So what will happen is that there will be a company or a mining operation who is only interested in the copper. So they'll go into these places and mine out the copper, leaving this big, strip in the land and this abandoned mine. And even though the copper is all mined out, there's still tremendous deposits of these malachite and azurite minerals that we can then go into and harvest and salvage, because that wasn't the company's main goal. They wanted the copper. They didn't care about anything else. So we can go in and kind of salvage what was left behind. And so that particular picture, that was an abandoned lead mine. We didn't find very much when we were out there. I think we found a couple little quartz crystals, maybe some anhydros, that sort of thing, but wasn't anything too spectacular. But honestly, I show that picture because it's the best picture I got of me in a mine, because it's dark and it's hard to take pictures down there.
I got to tell you, there were two other pictures that when you sent them to me, they wouldn't let me preview them. I have a feeling I left out. You sent me 5 or 6 images. The first 2 or 3 wouldn't let me open them.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm just saying that for future reference. I really wanted your
Sure.
logo up there.
Oh, that would have been it. That would have been the logo. The logo for my little Encotus fish is my logo.
Okay, what is that encode? What does that mean, Encotus?
Sure. So Encotus is actually an extinct species of fish.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay.
And the reason I chose it as my little mascot, if you will, was the very first dig that I went on, where I was bringing home fossils from the field from Africa. So this is kind of a new experience for me. I was bringing them home, and Encotus is a fairly common fossil to find when you're out there. And so I was out there finding just tons of teeth and bones and jaw plates and all these different things. And I was kind of a newbie back then, and I was shipping everything home because it was all amazing to me. So I'm shipping it home, and eventually I just get whole crates full of nothing but Encotus fish. And so I kind of jokingly referred to it as, well, this is the Encotus order. This isn't Erik's order. This is just a bunch of Encotus. It's Encotus's order. And I thought, Encotus sounds kind of cool. Like maybe I can get a designer to make me a little logo featuring the Encotus fish. And so I thought, let me try that. And so that's where Encotus Industries came from.
Interesting. I knew there was something to it. It wasn't just a mishmash of letters.
Yep.
We've got about a minute and a half in this segment. I'm going to run inside later on this break and bring something out for later to show you.
Sure.
But in your digs, what's I'm going to use the word rarest, finest, synonymous with maybe most expensive if it's sold or had a price on it. What's the nicest thing you ever dug out of Mama Earth?
Boy, I'm gonna have to say it's probably some of the trilobite specimens, because those trilobites, you can get a lot of very common ones, but you can get some very intricate ones. And at that point, finding it is one half the battle, and then prepping it out of the stone is the other half. And I've got some people who are very, very good fossil preppers, people here in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, where I'm out of, but also people in Tucson and all over the world who can do it. But I'm going to say trilobites just because they're the soft spot for me. That was what I was featured on the History Channel for as well, was trilobites. So yeah, trilobites are definitely my favorite thing to find.
Well, okay, you mentioned something about a fossil prepper.
Yes.
If I'm on the money, my analogy is going to be correct. Is he kind of like the guy that cuts the diamond, the giant diamond, and they spend years analyzing it and, all of that. And they do the same kind of thing with the trial, how to get it out.
Yes.
And it's the same complicated process.
Yes. And honestly, it's about the equipment and the materials that you can use to get it out. I've seen everything from the air stylus, which is essentially like a little mini jackhammer that you can chip away at the stone and try to carve around the fossil and get the matrix out of the way. Everything to like a little sand blaster, essentially. I've seen some super detailed ones that you can shoot one little individual grain of sand at a time to these fossils out. And then, of course, everybody's best friend is you got to have some acid. With a little bit of acid, you can remove some of that stone very carefully and just little bits by little bits to reveal the fossil, all the detail, because some of these fossils can be incredibly detailed. And there's a lot of people who don't know that, but they can be incredibly detailed.
What's the PSI on that 1 grain of sand?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
I'm gonna have to
okay.
call my guy and ask him.
No, I'm curious. I left a briefcase at a military Air Force base years ago, and they told me they blew it up with a 60,000 pound per square inch water cannon, and you could cut concrete beams with that. So I was
Man,
wondering, what was the PSI on a grain of
man.
sand?
Well, I'll tell you that it's far more
We got to
gentle.
go to break. I ran
Okay,
over
gotta
it.
go
We'll
to
be
break.
back after these commercial words.
Hey, that,
Here's Steve the Bookman Eisenstein.
Welcome back, my fellow rare bookians. We are engaged in a humorous, entertaining, informative discussion about artifacts from the Stone Age to the Space Age with Erik Lehmkuhl. We're going to pick it up from where we left off for a little improvised stuff here. We were kind of showing each other some things on break that you can't see until you watch this on YouTube later. But Eric has dug out, gone into the caves, gotten dirty, all this other stuff to dig out artifacts. I have dug out two artifacts in my entire life, maybe a horseshoe or two.
okay.
This is what they call a vessel head from the St. Croix Basin, 975 to 1050 AD. Okay.
Wow.
And this is what it looks like.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh,
The story is precious as this. And I'm not going to take this out, but this is a sand dollar, same dig with intaglio.
wow.
How
Wow.
did I
Wow.
get these? What kind of scuba gear? Was I in my twin 72s at the time? Or what was this? I'll tell you what it was. It was a freaking storage auction. Okay.
There we go.
I'm at a storage auction, and this was pre the TV programs. When you ran somebody up back then, you didn't want them to know it. Today they brag about it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, I was the book guy. It was the bed guy. There was this guy, that guy. So there was a warehouse that came up, nothing but those office, the cartons that you use for files,
Hmm.
neat, clean. I think there were exactly 50 of them. 48 of them had books. As I'm looking at the books, I realized that I had sold this guy some of the books because you book, especially some of them, like when
Of course.
Jane's fighting ships from whatever it was 1919 or something, and I didn't know. I knew him as a military historian. I didn't know he was a well-known archaeologist.
Oh,
Okay, so 48 boxes books. Next box artifacts, Celtic pelt toys. I
wow.
kept these two for myself. Axe heads and other names that I forgot. Between the Kislak Museum and some small museum that happened to have been at a book fair I was at when I exhibited them with if I had a Celtic peltoid, I had a book on it and I put it on, okay. The last box was the blessing box. It was the dig papers. Everything
Oh,
was removed legitimately.
wow.
Yeah, I mean, I knew enough about it to hope that there were dig papers in it, because
Yeah, yeah.
replevin is a very dirty word.
Hmm.
You know? So continuing on, what are you doing these days? Or let's set it out. Let's go to the book story. This
Sure.
is all yours. They said in Rome, the wreath is yours. Okay.
Yes, yes.
You posted a book in Vintage Rare and Antique Books that was a
Hmm.
1580s math book, and you asked $25,000, and you were
Yep.
tired when you wrote it.
Yep.
So that's how we met. I said, "There's more to this guy," And so tell us about the book now. How did
Sure. Sure. Well, the book came out of Indiana. That was where I originally came from. And honestly, I don't necessarily specialize in rare books. And so I'm really happy to be part of, your show in this community. I'm learning so much, which is honestly something I really enjoy. I mean, to be honest, I just like being part of this kind of stuff. But so in Indiana, there was a sale, there was a big auction, a big estate sale happening, and I was there because this particular guy had a lot of Civil War artifacts, and that was really what I was going to go for, was the Civil War artifacts. So of course I'm looking around, I'm trying to find the best deals, figuring out if I have clients to buy things, and eventually I realized that there's this book that just has just, nobody's really paying attention to it. It's kind of just under the radar, and of course everybody else is there for militaria, they're there for something totally different, and so it's just kind of getting ignored and kind of glossed over. And I thought, I think that there's something to this, and there was something in my gut that said this book is special. And so I went ahead and purchased it, got it home. Still, again, not a rare book deal. I've handled plenty of rare documents and things, so it
You
was
spent
safe.
a lot of money for that book.
I did spend a lot of money for it. And it was, and eventually when I got it home, I'm taking care of it. I'm making sure that I'm doing every bit of research I possibly can. And I'm calling the people who might have something to know about it, but they're not too, not big experts in the field. And so I'm trying to do more and more research and eventually figure out that this was a legitimate, the Della Nuova Geometria from 1587. And it's written by a guy who's got a name, Patrizzi. There we go, Francisco Patrizzi. And this is just, I mean, just shy of 100 years after the printing press was even invented. And I'm thinking, whoa, this is special. So I start doing some more research with, now I'm looking into these specific names and these dates, and I find an old auction listing that was from, maybe 5 years or so prior. And this auction listing said that here's a copy of this book, and it sold for $20,000. And I thought, whoa, like this is serious money. Like we got to really look into this a little more. So I start digging more into that auction listing and digging more into my own book. And it was something out of Indiana Jones. I was able to match the stains on the pages to the photos in the auction listing from that way back when it was sold for 20,000. And I was just absolutely blown away. I thought, this is fantastic. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
You took a calculated risk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very surprised that it went so unnoticed.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, I am
Uh,
too.
Now there's another portion of you another area of yours that was really interesting. You have been a frequent guest on Porn Stars.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, for the audience, how does that happen?
Sure.
You approach them, they approach you, take it from there.
Sure. Well, and I said it earlier before the break, and I'll say it again because it really is this important, but it's all about your network. It's all about the friends that you make along the way. You cannot be the guy who just values money over everything and keeps trying to one up people. I got where I am because of the people that I know. They like me, they trust me. That's how I got here. So, anyway, I have a very good friend of mine named Derek Reed. He owns Club Caraway here in Minneapolis, and I'll get to him in a second. But the Pawn Stars were doing a show called Pawn Stars Do America. And this is when they would have the Pawn Stars travel to the different cities instead of the people coming to the Pawn Stars in their shop in Vegas. This is where the Pawn Stars would go to the people. And so they were coming up with all kinds of interesting locations to film. Well, when they decided they wanted to do the Minneapolis episode, they were trying to scout filming locations. And at some point they said, this is a great place called the Semple Mansion, which is a historic building here in the Twin Cities. And it just so happened that Derek Reed runs his business out of the carriage house of the Semple Mansion. And they met Derek, and they said they got along very well. And Derek's very professional, very respectable guy. And they responded to that because they're also very respectable, very professional people. And eventually they said, hey, we'd like to use this location to do some filming. Just by the way, do you happen to know anybody who's got some cool antiques or oddities or something that we can film with that might be good for TV? And of course, Derek said, well, boy, have I got the guy for you. And so that was, he gave them my name and number. And so then the Pawn Stars reached out to me to say they wanted to try to film and find some cool, interesting stuff. So I gave them just a ton of different materials to try to film with. and they decided that they wanted to film with not only me. I was fortunate enough to be on the show with my trilobites, but they also wanted to film with several other items. And when they were trying to film these items, they had said, listen, it looks weird if you are the person who's always giving the items to but we want to film with these items. So we'll either have somebody else kind of sell the item for you, or you can have a friend or family member do it because they do have some connection. We'd rather do that. Do you think you can have people who can do that? So I'm like, of course, that's an easy choice. So for those Pawn Stars episodes, we got to see my mom and my dad, my wife, my neighbors, cousins. I mean, just everybody's on there. So for us, it's a lot of fun to watch. For the general public, you'd watch and you would never know. It just looks like random people.
Yeah.
But for us, we get to go and say, "Oh, look, there we are. There's this, there's that." It's a ton of fun.
I'm sure it is. I mean, I mentioned this to you. I've said it on the show a couple of times. Edie and I would get away for the summer, and we went to Vegas in the environs for somewhere around 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and I always threw an expensive book in the suitcase just in case, it was something to play with. And we went to the store, the pawn store, and the kids must have been in school. The old man was there. Rick and I had a conversation, and I always say I don't know if there was a zygote in his mind about that time at the program, but I don't know. Several years later, I said, "Wait a minute, Edie, we've been in that store, and we were talking about it." The funniest thing is, what book did I bring today? They probably would have grabbed it. It was a book by Carl. It was a book called Hunting the Elephant in Africa, 1914. Captain Charles Stigand was the author. Carl Fisher had an elephant that would lead parades and haul logs, publicity thing.
Huh.
Stigand knew Fisher. So in the copy of the book that he gave to Carl and Jane Fisher, he doodles Carl Fisher in his Lincoln suit and high hat, Jane in her sundress, Rosie the elephant in a circus ring, and Carl and Jane are pulling the elephant. This is how Carl and Jane Fisher hunt elephants, Captain Stigand. Well, he was killed early on an African safari, like 26 years old. I had that book. I was asking 3,500 for it at the time. Rick looked at it, and the old man comes up and said, "We only buy gold and silver," so that took care of that, But years after that, I sold it to the University of Miami for the same $3,500.
There we go.
But we've got time. No, I might have a trilobite or something. I didn't. I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm curious. But we're looking at the show. Do you do any shows? Do you have any shows like exhibiting, like a book fair or a fossil fair or something coming up?
So the next show we do Junk Bonanza. That's a show here in Minneapolis. I would highly recommend everybody to go to it. It's the Canterbury Downs. There's not just me there. There's a lot of other very high-end vendors too. So, I mean, it's a wonderful place. But Junk Bonanza is the big one for us. We also do one called Gold Rush in Rochester, Minnesota. That's another very, very good show for us. And this year, we're hoping to get into an oddities show here in Minneapolis.
We'll be back after these commercial words.
Of course.